What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I just won a Marvel Snap tournament, the last community gaming tournament of the year, actually, with this Wiccan deck. I played this every round, and in this video, we're going to look at the first 4 rounds of the tournament, and then the quarterfinals and finals will be separate videos with live commentary, actually. I played these ones on my phone and switched over to live commentary when I was like, oh, hey, I might actually win this thing, and then I did. So here is the deck list. It is Wiccan with Quicksilver, Wicsilver, sometimes I refer to it as, with a bunch of 2-cost cards in the deck that generate cards, Cable, Hawkeye, and Peni Parker, and then a variety of 3-cost cards that can either just put power on the board or provide a little bit of disruption, and then the rest of the deck is Wiccan, Shang-Chi, Alioth, and Gorr, which is absolutely massive, especially in this deck. The cards that you generate off of Hawkeye and Peni Parker are also on reveal cards, though the spider from Peni Parker isn't exactly an on reveal because it winds up attaching to something, though I have used it as an on reveal in like some very, very weird corner cases. But in this game, I am battling for Hala to start things off, was able to battle for that location with Negasonic. Then importantly, I was able to activate Wiccan here on turn 4. And potentially even more importantly, my opponent is playing Silver Surfer and I just stole it with Copycat. I really like Cable and Copycat, especially in Conquest mode, that little information package to know exactly what your opponent is doing, and more importantly, with the case of Cable and Copycat, what they are not doing, because that means that Silver Surfer's on the bottom of my opponent's deck, which means they won't be able to draw it this game. Because of that, I wind up getting a very straightforward 2 cubes out of this first one, and in the second game, I also am able to steal a Silver Surfer from my opponent, but I don't have the Wiccan curve, so I'm not going to be able to actually draw the Wiccan, but I have no 2-cost card. But with Nor Dimension and my opponent playing Magic, I still get a ton of energy on the final turn of this game. I'm going to drop Gorr plus a pair of Djinns over into Limbo, and Gorr will be able to more than make up for the lack of power that those Djinns are giving me. They're actually all giving me +3 power, and that is enough for me to snap as my opponent hangs in it for one more turn before retreating. Game 3, we have a TVA game where I just randomly happen to catch my opponent's Gladiator with Negasonic Teenage Warhead, so that's another retreat, and then my luck starts to turn around a little bit as Gladiator gives my opponent Gladiator, which means their Gladiator is actually going to stick around, and this destroys my Gorr, unfortunately. If there was just one more on-reveal card in play, Gorr would have been bigger than Gladiator, and it would have stuck around, and I would have won easily in Monster Metropolis. But now things are looking a little bit dicey, but Copycat gives me Serra, which feels like it could be pretty interesting, getting to Wiccan and then play Serra on turn 5. On turn 6, I'm going to be able to dump out a bunch of stuff. And that actually turns into a turn 7 because my opponent has a Limbo here again. So now on turn 6, I am just going to load up with some spiders on my pair of Peni Parkers from Time Theater. Unfortunately, they're going to take out one of these Peni Parkers here. Their Copycat copied my Cable, which then stole my Negasonic Teenage Warhead. So this is an awkward interaction. They wind up destroying the Peni Parker. I do still get the extra energy out of it though. So now on the final turn of the game, I'm going to have what is that, 7 plus 4, I'm going to have 11 energy here still, and all of my cards are going to be 1 cheaper, so there is still a lot I can do, and my opponent's Gladiator is in range of Shang-Chi in Monster Metropolis with that +3 power on it, so I can play Shang-Chi to swing that location, and then I think I can just dump a bunch of power in Limbo and actually get that location as well, even if my opponent has a Silver Surfer. I'm doing the calculations real quick and making sure that the math is mathin' and that I want to keep Peni Parker in the center location, because importantly, even if my opponent has Silver Surfer, they can't also like Nova Killmonger this game because they don't have the room to play a Nova. So the best that they could possibly do would be Silver Surfer Absorbing Man. Haven't seen Absorbing Man out of my opponent just yet though, and they actually just have Killmonger Silver Surfer with no Nova, which is not going to be enough in Monster Metropolis. After we take down their Gladiator, we will beat them there just barely. It's very close, but it is 19-18, and then we're also able to take the win in Limbo and win our first match. My camera died, so I'm just going to take that off the screen, but while I'm thinking about it, now is a great time to remind you that any comment on any of my videos this season enters you into a giveaway to win 2 mystery variants, a premium mystery variant, and a green cosmic border. In my second match, we are up against a junk deck. This is a pretty popular archetype right now because it's pretty good to junk up all of the Doom 2099 players, and so we're seeing a decent amount of it. That was one of the reasons that I did not play my Thanos Arishem deck and decided to play this instead. This turn, my opponent plays a Dr. Octopus, which grabs Gorr from my hand for free, which is pretty sweet. I am a little bit afeared that they might have a way to kill the Gorr with the Fenris Wolf out there on the field, but I can use Red Guardian to turn off the Fenris Wolf, and that gives me enough confidence here to snap. My opponent winds up retreating from that one for 2, but in this game, I have to retreat from an early snap on the Nexus, and if they're able to just junk me out in that location and then commit a bunch of power there themselves, there's really no way I can win. And then I decide to retreat again from this game when my Negasonic Teenage Warhead does not go exactly as expected. It destroys a green goblin, which is only really helping my opponent, and I am winning in 3 locations right now, but I feel like it's pretty easy for my opponent to beat me in Limbo, and a cannonball can wreck my Gorr. So I'm not super confident in Wakandan Embassy either, and I ultimately just decide to retreat for 1 cube. The next game, my opponent snaps on turn 1 after seeing the Abbey, which is really good for them because they have the Hood. I decide to stay in it on the idea that I could draw a 2-drop. I've got 3 2-drops in the deck, but I wind up not drawing one, so that makes things a little bit dicey. But then again, I have an opportunity to snap before Red Guardianing their Fenris Wolf, and this time my opponent gets out of there before I can take away their Activate ability. We move into high stakes rounds now, and I actually still don't really know what my opponent is even doing with Fenris Wolf, which is a little bit awkward. And I was also playing these games while I was eating dinner for the first few rounds of this tournament, and then like I said, the last 2 rounds that I'm going to showcase in another video will be with live commentary, but might have been a little bit distracted, certainly for this game, where Utopia creates a really interesting puzzle if I am trying to spend all of my energy every turn so that I could potentially satisfy a future Wiccan. Now, luckily, I've got all of my 2-cost cards, so I'll be able to generate some cards off of those and just continue to spend all of my energy every turn. And that's basically all I was focused on right now. And so I'll be honest, I did not even think twice about just playing Red Guardian to turn off my opponent's Fenris Wolf once again, and then just playing one of my arrows here along with Cable to continue to efficiently use my energy every turn. And yeah, completely forgot about the Bifrost. So that is going to now completely lock me out of 2 different locations, and I'm up against a junk deck. Yeah, there's no coming back from this one. I just junked myself. Congratulations, you junked yourself, and now I really can't win. So now we are tied up at 6 cubes apiece, and my opponent snaps on turn 1 of this game as well. After seeing Hellfire Club, I'm not sure, they must have something pretty good in their hand, but I've got a reasonable curve here with Quicksilver into Cable into Gladiator, so I am glad enough to stick with it and see what happens. And what happens is I wind up drawing Wiccan on turn 4 in just a second here, but that is just going to set me up to have a huge energy advantage over my opponent, and I realize that if my opponent wants to play that Red Hulk that we just saw, they're probably going to do it this turn into either Limbo or Great Portal, and then they're going to take priority because I'm not going to battle for the sewer system by playing Gorr into it this turn. I don't have my Alioth right now, so I don't want priority. I actually want to just toss priority so that way I can play Gorr on the final turn and dodge my opponent's cannonball. So all I'm going to play here actually is Basic Arrow, and it's a pretty tempting position for my opponent to just play their Red Hulk into Limbo, and I guess Cannonball is really what my opponent has. I do wind up drawing the Alioth, by the way, too, but I guess Cannonball is my opponent's main way to activate Fenris Wolf, but I don't think they're going to be able to overcome 15 power in Great Portal, more than that actually with the Basic Arrow, nor do I think they're going to be able to overcome the Gorr, nor the Gorr. They will give me a rock. I'm able to take the rest of my opponent's cubes and win our second match. Match 3, in the dark, I see that we have a perfect curve out here, so I'm just going to snap to the idea that I can play a Wiccan on turn 4. Elysium is actually going to mean that this is a turn 3 Wiccan as long as I can spend all of my energy this turn, which I can with both Cable and Peni Parker, and I only have Shang-Chi in my deck to Zabu, but I figure why not just use the Zabu here and get a slightly cheaper Shang-Chi potentially. Cable steals their Red Guardian, that's a pretty good card to steal as well, and then I get to play that turn 3 Wiccan, which is definitely a snappable position. This is a pretty big moment as well. I get to use their Red Guardian to 50-50 take out their Doom 2099 and also give them the Red Guardian. I'm not actually filling up this location. This is my first card played to Castle Zemo, so I will be able to take out their Doom 2099, and then I'm actually going to junk them out in the location, or at least that's initially what it looks like. It's not actually going to be quite that simple, as the card that they wind up flipping up here is a Magneto, which grabs my Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and if you're not familiar with this interaction already, there you go. Negasonic Teenage Warhead destroys Magneto, making it a really, really good card against my opponent. That basically means that I can play Negasonic to any location on the final turn with priority, and if my opponent plays a Magneto, it will get destroyed as long as it pulls the Negasonic in. So that's a really interesting interaction to be aware of. And then on the final turn of the game, we are tied over in Castle Zemo, so all I have to do is Alioth to protect my Gorr, and we've Gorred this one in the bag. So I'm going to use Alioth Center plus a Copycat, and it turns out my opponent does not actually have a Shang-Chi here, but they do still succumb to the Alioth because their play for this turn alongside that Lady Deathstrike was a Super Scroll. So they are not going to get my Gorr's activated ability, and they're going to lose to Differential. Super Scroll is definitely still a scary card to have to look out for, though, so I'm not looking forward to playing around with that one for the rest of the match. But this game is absolutely wild. I made a play that, I actually kind of messed up on my play here on the final turn, but it wound up still doing everything that I needed it to. So pretty clearly you can just Acid Arrow in Atlantis, and if my opponent moves the vision out of that location, we will still junk them up there. And I don't really need to do this because Gladiator beats the Iron Lad, but I'm thinking they could also move the Iron Lad out because we've got a New York game. So I do decide to Acid Arrow, and they do move the Iron Lad out, but what is important here is this allows my Gladiator to dodge my opponent's Shang-Chi. Absolutely crazy. Then I give them the Acid Arrow, then I accidentally pull the Acid Arrow away. I did not mean to do that, but I still managed to get the win, so there you go. This game, my opponent just had way more power than me, but they never snapped, so they only get me for 1 cube. I make another mistake this game, which it was kind of complicated. I was trying to figure out where I wanted to play this Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and if I wanted to play it in Eternal's arc, where my opponent certainly will have to play, but could play around it potentially, or I could put it in Jotunheim, and now they only have 1 turn to play to Jotunheim before it floods. So I thought this was kind of cute. However, with Doom 2099, now they just don't even have to play to Jotunheim, and they've already beat me in that location, and I've wasted my Negasonic Teenage Warhead. So that's a little bit awkward. I do have an extra energy this turn though from Hope Summers, which Copycat copied. So I'm just going to play Gorr into this basic arrow, and I wasn't fully thinking about, I mean, if you just read both of these locations, Eternal's Arc triggers at the end of this turn, Mindscape triggers at the start of next turn, so I was a little bit fearful here that I was about to lose the rest of my hand. I didn't know if I wanted to go for a Red Guardian 50-50 as well on this Doom 2099, but ultimately I just decided to Gorr and leave my opponent with Cable, Pim Arrow, Shang-Chi, and Red Guardian. I remember like repeating that to myself, knowing that they were about to take it, and they actually don't wind up taking it because Mindscape floods, and then I actually do stay in and battle on the final turn, which I thought I did the math for, and I thought I was looking good. However, and it's really quite close, I wind up tying over in the flooded location after my opponent gets 1 more Doombot out there. I'm going to get up to 20, and then they are going to get 1 more Doombot, and they are going to go up to 20 in the flooded location because it pumps up 3 of their Doombots there. And then I lose on differential, so I lose 4 cubes. So I've made some mistakes, which is unfortunate, but you know what they say, rather lucky than good. And I managed to get rather lucky for the rest of this match. I nail my opponent's Doom 2099 with Negasonic and Priority, causing them to have to retreat before they're locked in for 4 cubes without their key card. And then to round out this match, my opponent has a Doom 2099 into X-Mansion on turn 3. X-Mansion gives me Swarm and gives my opponent Ultron, locking them out of the other 2 locations. They can now only put 1 more card on the board for the rest of the game, as long as they win in Hala. I could play Wiccan into Hala, open that location up for them, but I've got no interest in that. We are just going to Wiccan over into Krakoa, and my opponent even just gives me the credit, recognizing what play I have to make. They're not going to play it out. They're going to retreat, and we're on to round 4. Round 4 is up against Madam Move, and I was thinking maybe it would be cool to just give my opponent a bunch of acid arrows with Kate Bishop and cloning vats, but with a pair of Madam Webs, there's just so much value that my opponent can get out of this. And I have another really cool play here. I just play a bunch of Pim arrows into cloning vats, and then I see that my opponent also has a dagger and is just going to get a ton of value from that too, and I wind up needing to retreat. Game 3, I decide to snap as I roll out this 50-50 Red Guardian into Madam Web, thinking that if I hit and then try to snap after that, there's no way that they will stay in it for 2 cubes. So I kind of have to snap before if I want to try to get a second cube here, and I miss but honestly, Aranya was still a pretty good hit. They were planning on moving that dagger over with Aranya and then having it in the Madam Web location. So now that I've turned off Aranya, I kind of actually did turn off Madam Web, kind of get to have my cake and eat it too there a little bit, and then I am eating good after that with Wiccan into Vibranium Mines, and I could actually use some Vibranium here because I think that'll help fill out my curve with the cheap 1/4. And I do find some Vibranium to play alongside Gorr on the final turn, but unfortunately I do not find a winning line here as my opponent is able to use... And I do find some Vibranium to play on the final turn alongside my Gorr into Onslaught Citadel. However, I don't find the win, unfortunately. I didn't think my opponent would be willing to play a Heimdall into Onslaught Citadel with the idea that I could have just moved over Cosmo, but they did, and now I lose because they just have too much power over in Vibranium Mines. My opponent here is another Fenris Wolf player where I can't figure out exactly how they're planning on destroying my stuff, but not a big deal. I get to just battle for Hala here. I'm already winning in the location by 3, so I felt like playing my Wiccan there was fairly safe. They use Ghost Spider to pull in their Vulture, and then they also reveal a Madam Web so they can get even more value out of this, other than just destroying my cards, and now they can get those cards themselves with Fenris Wolf, and then they snap, and honestly, I probably could have retreated from here, but I have the extra energy from Wiccan, which is kind of making me want to stay in it, and I feel like I've got at the very least an interesting play with Spider onto the monster, which gives me a lot of flexibility that maybe will be difficult for them to play around. So that's what I go for. They have a cloak though, which means that it doesn't really matter, but what actually does matter, so my opponent only has one space that they can play into with they can play into Hala right now, but they can't play into the Vault, obviously. They can move cards into the Vault with Madam Web, but they can't really move anything else around super easily, so I think that this 14 power in Monster Island is all that I have to contend with right now. And I can beat that with Gorr, plus, I mean, I could just play Alioth. Hawkeye plus Gorr is a little bit more. It's 12 power instead, so I go for that, thinking that my opponent might just play a Heimdall this turn, and then Heimdall will blow up to Negasonic, and then they'll move in the Vulture, the Madam Web, and the Cloak for 14 points in Hala, plus I guess 6 more, so for 20, and I am currently looking at slightly more than that, 25 points in Monster Island. So despite not looking like the best game, I beat Heimdall here, which is, I mean, the main card that I expect to play around from my opponent. I forgot they also get to move some other cards around here. They get to swap their Human Torch and their Cloak for a little bit more power, but then their play is Heimdall, which I was ready for. I'm able to blow that up with Negasonic, leaving them with just 4 power from Human Torch in Hala, and tying up this match 5 cubes to 5. I get a pretty nice handle on things here with a solid 1, 2, 3, 4 curve, and Hawkeye could give me Acid Arrow as well, which I can use for additional value in Sewer System. Plus, I think I've got enough early cards, Gladiator and Wiccan, to battle and win in Asgard, which might be a little bit tricky. I don't want to play all of them in that location, but with the win from Asgard, I will have extra cards and extra energy, and I feel pretty confident that that will allow me to win this game. So I'm snapped up here and ready to go. Expansion doesn't do anything super crazy, just gives us both 3 power there. My opponent also gets a Cable, so they've got one of my cards, but they aren't able to battle for Asgard. So I win that location, I get the +2 bonus cards and the +2 bonus energy, and I'm feeling good right now. Alioth has mostly, or I'm sorry, Cloak has mostly come into the rightmost location, so I play Alioth there on turn 5 to try to catch it out here. That's the idea, while also giving them an acid arrow in the sewer system. They get me a little bit by cloaking into the sewer system instead, but I do still get some Alioth value taking out their Negasonic that they cabled from me, which I think is still a pretty good deal. And then on the final turn, I've got 8 energy, which I can use to play Gorr to totally demolish the sewer system plus cable. And there's other things that I might want to consider here. My opponent does not really have that great of a draw regardless though, so I do have to decide, do I want to try to battle for multiple locations? Do I want to care potentially about where they might Heimdall and how that might change things? And ultimately I just decide to go for a very basic Gorr center, cable to the right. Looks good enough to me. We already have a sizable lead in that location. We'll get a few more points, and I actually get to win all 3 locations, push my opponent down to 1 cube, and get the information that Spider-Man 2099 is how they are destroying cards for Fenris Wolf. Now we move into our high stakes rounds, and I let my opponent have White Hot Room because I didn't feel like filling that location was super great for me, but I do still have Wiccan energy for this game. So on turn 5, I am able to just play Gorr into Atlantis and ultimately play around with some other ideas here. I'm like, do I want the arrows from Hawkeye? Kind of, because acid arrow's good in Atlantis as we saw earlier, but ultimately I realize I just want to play Gorr into Atlantis and take advantage of Atlantis myself. I think that's the most important thing. And then on the final turn of the game, with this cloak from my opponent, that is looking like a pretty tempting location to just Shang-Chi, and I think that will be able to win it for me. Copycat steals a Cosmo, which is fine. It's not going to be super important though. I think the only important thing here is to Shang-Chi, and that will destroy either Human Torch or Dagger or even Heimdall. Whatever my opponent moves over, I have priority, so they can't Alioth me and they can't Cosmo because they don't have it. We just saw it with Copycat. So this looks like it's going to be in the bag. I will just throw Hawkeye into Necrotia for 2 more points onto Gorr, and they do move over the Dagger, so that is all she wrote. We'll be able to take him out there and win our 4th match, bringing me into the quarterfinals. And like I said, that is going to be coming up in a separate video with live commentary for today. That is going to be it. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.